and then it hit us. Steve McFeely came up with a really incredible idea.
How did you guys react to him telling you?
Oh, yeah.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Guys, it is always an honor. Thank you for taking the time.
Of course,
our pleasure.
thank
You know, I feel like a lot of the illustrations in the source material of Electric State are just these really beautiful reminders that a single image can just tell you so much in a story. I'm sort of curious, you guys have pulled a lot from different frames, whether it be Marvel Comics or obviously this source material. What's the most you've ever been impacted as a storyteller by a single frame that you were able to get the most out of?
You know, it's
Single
interesting.
frame, that's a great one.
It's in the book. It's
Yeah.
in the Electric State book, but it's actually not in the movie. We didn't end up putting it in the film, but
Yeah.
it's the guy standing. It tells the story best of everything in the book, which is this, how technology creates alienation and addiction issues. And there's a guy standing in a parking lot at like a remote Narrowcaster station, and his head is just tilted towards the sky, and he's standing there all alone. And it really tells the story of, like, you know, how Simon perceives the you know, unhealthy relationship we have with technology.
But it's also like an arrested moment where it's just, the image is like begging you to imagine what happened just before this, what happens just after this. And I think that was what was so exciting about Simon Stålenhag's work in the book, is just it suggested a vast story that was mysterious and unknown that he didn't completely deliver to you in that book. So it allowed us and allowed our creative partners, Chris Marcus and Steve McFeely, the writers on this movie, to just really swim in that world and find something.
There's a generation of filmmakers right now who are growing up watching your work. What do you think is your single frame that is most influencing them?
Wow.
I mean, maybe it's Tony Stark on his knees right before he snaps. You know.
You know what's so funny is before Joe said that, that was the image that popped into my head too, strangely.
You guys have given you guys have given some of the greatest moments of all time. If you allow me to geek out for a second, I'm a big believer that Alan Silvestri is one of God's gifts to cinema.
Yeah.
I think that the Back to the Future score is one of the probably top 5 greatest movie scores of all time.
Maybe number one.
Honestly, you could make a really solid case for number 1, which I think.
And by the way, you know that the score doesn't show up until 20 minutes into that movie.
Okay, so I want to talk about, because also I actually also need the instrumental version of Wonderwall.
Yeah.
I hope that's not a spoiler, but when there was a moment last night at the premiere where I went, and I go, is that Wonderwall? Like, it's just beautiful. So when you have Alan Silvestri, but then you have an incredible collection of like kind of 90s needle drops that you can rely on, how do you decide whether or not a moment is appropriate for Alan or whether or not an appropriate version for appropriate moment for Wonderwall?
Well, I want to point out that Wonderwall is orchestrated by Alan Silvestri.
No!
So there you go.
Something I never knew I always wanted.
That
Exactly.
and Don't Stop Believing. They're both Alans.
Yeah.
So. But that was an idea we came up with early on, was to have Alan take over certain cues. Obviously, there's a character in the movie who, you know, a taco who plays a piano. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it won't later.
Do you ever think you'd ever say that in an interview at any point in your career?
No.
But yes, it was important to bed the audience in the period of the movie. The period's really a key part of the film. The way that we're interpreting this fable is that, you know, it happened at a time, you know, the 90s were really the decade where we transitioned into the digital age. So it's interesting to play with this notion, were we more advanced at that time, you know, what would have happened? And so the music, the needle drops really help us set the tone. But this idea that they integrate with the score was critically important because we have Alan Silvestri and because he's so brilliant.
This sounds like a weird comparison. It reminded me a lot of what Zemeckis did for Forrest Gump, where it was a lot of needle drops, but also there's a great Forrest Gump score and how they kind of blend together.
Well, it's interesting, yeah, because, you know, there maybe were similar needs between the two movies because they're both sort of a revisionist histories, right? So. You know,
that's interesting.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So Alan's music certainly provides the sort of heart and soul and energy of the movie, largely. But the needle drops, the period music that became important to this movie was because we were also trying to ground this fantasy story in a reality. We wanted it to feel tethered to some common history that we all shared. So that's why they were so useful, and perhaps the same way.
I love that. They're pulling out here really quick. I feel like one of the lessons we can pull out of this movie is this idea that if we're surrounded by the right people, by the people that love us, we can do anything in this world. You guys work together so well. I want you to take me to the moment where you looked at each other and went, let's call Robert Downey Jr. and ask him if he'll come back. How does that phone call go?
Interestingly enough, Downey decided to go back before we decided to go back.
Yeah.
I had a dinner with Downey about a year before we agreed to do the movie, where he was trying to convince us why we should do the movie. We just didn't have a story to tell. We didn't have a way in yet. And then it hit us. Steve McFeely came up with a really incredible idea.
How did you guys react to him telling you?
Yeah.
To Downey? Yeah, we were thrilled. I mean, look Robert is just one of the most talented performers on the planet, and for him to be motivated to explore a new character like Victor Von Doom, it was like it doesn't get more exciting. Yeah. So it's like,
guys, you're the reason I love movies.
Thank you,
and I love
sir.
you so much. I hope you can tell how much I appreciate all of every time I get to do this.
are you kidding? Like, that was so amazing. Thank you.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.